Welcome back to CIA Declassified. In the modern era, the intersection of neurotechnology and human endurance has reached a fever pitch, but the blueprints for this modern obsession were drafted in the dark. In the mid 20th century, the agency's technical services staff became obsessed with the mechanics of the human spirit. They wanted to know if a man could be kept awake, aware, and functional, even while his chemistry was being systematically dismantled. This wasn't a search for a better soldier, it was a search for the on switch of the human consciousness. Today, we examined the darkest corridor of behavioral modification. We are looking at the project designed to sustain awareness in the face of total sensory and chemical overload. This was MKALIVE. How did this project get its name? The designation MKALIVE was derived from the agency's MK diagraph, which indicated a project managed by the technical services staff, specifically within the realm of mind control. The suffix alive was a literal operational directive to keep subjects in a state of hyperacute consciousness, while other sub-projects sought to induce sleep, amnesia, or stupor. MKALIVE was the mirror image. It was the pursuit of infinite awareness, ensuring that a subject could not retreat into the safety of unconsciousness, no matter the trauma applied. MKALIVE turned the human brain into a laboratory for chemical endurance. The project was overseen by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the head of the CIA's chemical division, who sought a way to prevent agency assets from being broken by foreign sedative-based interrogations. A quote from a declassified 1957 budget memo. The goal is the development of a chemical agent capable of maintaining a state of acute alertness and cognitive function for periods exceeding 100 hours without the onset of psychosis. End quote. Researchers experimented with high-potency stimulants, including pharmaceutical-grade D-amphetamine and experimental psychotropics, to counteract the effects of massive doses of barbiturates. Logs confirm that MKALIVE utilized sensory overload chambers where subjects were exposed to high-frequency strobe lights and white noise while under the influence of consciousness extending drugs. A quote from the Church Committee report: the agency conducted human experimentation on unwitting subjects to determine the efficacy of biological and chemical materials for the alteration of human behavior. End quote. Documentation shows the project utilized safe houses in San Francisco and New York City to observe subjects in real-world environments while they were kept in drug-induced wakefulness. Records indicate that the agency collaborated with researchers at the University of Rochester to study the metabolic threshold of the central nervous system under extreme stress. Technical memos describe the use of electroconvulsive reentry, where low-level electrical currents were applied to the temples to jumpstart a subject who was slipping into a coma-like state. MKALIVE researchers documented a phenomenon they called the third-day psychosis, where subjects would begin to experience vivid hallucinations while remaining physically hyperactive. The project tested the use of anti-hypnotic agents designed to make a subject immune to the effects of verbal suggestion and hypnotic induction. Reports show that the agency attempted to create a continuous awareness cocktail that could be administered through a slow-release intravenous drip. Internal CIA memos confirm that the project sought to map the physical seat of consciousness within the reticular activating system of the brain. Documentation proves that MKALIVE was a primary contributor to the agency's understanding of sleep deprivation as an interrogation tool. The project utilized psychological pressure tests where subjects were forced to complete complex mathematical equations while under the influence of consciousness warping drugs. Records show that the CIA investigated the use of synthesized adrenaline to maintain blood pressure and heart rate during extreme consciousness extension trials. A quote from an internal MKALIVE progress report. The subject appears to have lost the ability to distinguish between reality and the induced state, yet remains capable of responding to complex commands with 90% accuracy. End quote. The program tracked the long-term neurological damage in subjects, noting a permanent vigilance syndrome in several individuals who participated in multi-day trials. MKALIVE utilized biofeedback monitors to allow researchers to see exactly when a subject's brainwaves shifted from alpha to beta frequencies. Technical logs confirm that the agency experimented with sound entrainment using specific frequencies to keep the brain in a high arousal state. Documentation reveals the use of cerebral analeptics, drugs specifically designed to stimulate the brain's respiratory and circulatory centers. The project explored the use of sensory isolation tanks to see if consciousness could be maintained without any external input at all. Logs show that the project spent significant resources studying the Lazarus reflex, the point at which a dying brain can be chemically reignited into temporary awareness. Internal memos describe the awareness anchor, a psychological technique where a subject is taught to fixate on a single object to prevent ego dissolution during chemical stress. Project records confirm that MKALIVE data was used to develop the alertness sustainment protocols still used by high-altitude pilots today. The agency recorded the pupillary response of subjects as a primary metric for determining the depth of the drug-induced state. A quote from Dr. Sidney Gottlieb: "We are looking for the point where the mind leaves the body and trying to keep it from departing." End quote. Project files confirm the use of aversive stimuli, including ice water immersion, to prevent subjects from lapsing into the chemical stupor caused by high doses of LSD-25. Records document the MKALIVE researchers shared data with the Department of Defense regarding the pharmacological fortification of Special Forces personnel. The agency contracted with private pharmaceutical firms to produce non-market stimulants that were never approved for public consumption. Logs detail the terminal vigil phase, where subjects were pushed past the point of physiological collapse to see if the mind remained active during organ failure. A quote from a declassified 1963 termination memo: "The project has successfully demonstrated that the conscious state is a chemical variable rather than a biological constant." End quote. Internal reports describe the echo effect, where subjects remained in a state of hyperarousal for months after the cessation of chemical administration. Documentation confirms that the agency utilized electrode implantation in certain primate studies under MKALIVE to directly stimulate the hypothalamus. The project utilized the Myers-Briggs type indicators to predict which personality types would survive drug-induced wakefulness the longest. MKALIVE shows the development of counter-soporifics, SOPORIFICS, designed to neutralize the truth serums used by Soviet intelligence. A quote from the 1977 Senate hearings on MKUltra: "The disregard for human dignity in the name of national security represents a fundamental failure of oversight." End quote. Archives show that the agency spent over $250,000, a massive sum in the 1950s, on the chemical procurement for MKALIVE alone. The project utilized audio looping of the subject's own voice to prevent the cognitive drifting associated with long-term isolation. Records show that the agency investigated synthetic melatonin blockers to permanently disrupt the natural sleep cycle. MKALIVE researchers monitored the galvanic skin response of subjects to measure the intensity of drug-induced terror. Internal memos describe the cognitive lock, a state where a subject can perform certain tasks but loses all capacity for creative or independent thought. The program experimented with the rapid cycle reversal of drug states, moving subjects from extreme sedation to extreme stimulation in minutes. Technical logs confirm the use of radio frequency arousal, attempting to influence brainwaves through external electromagnetic fields. Records prove the project utilized prisoner volunteer programs, offering reduced sentences for participation in high-risk medical research. Agency files detail the metabolic cost of awareness, calculating the exact caloric intake required to keep a drug-stimulated brain functioning. The project documented the disintegration of self, noting the exact hour at which subjects lost the ability to use the word I. A quote from a declassified technical memo: "The subject is no longer an individual, but a functioning node of conscious data." End quote. Records show that MKALIVE was the primary reason the agency developed its own internal psychiatric review board to manage damaged assets. When we dig into the declassified MKALIVE files, we hit a black wall. The thickest, most impenetrable ink occur in the folder labeled Operational Appendix Terminal Condition 9. This section holds the record for the most dense redactions regarding subject disposition in the entire mind control archive. Entire pages are blacked out where the agency describes the, quote, post-consciousness event, end quote. Why is the final outcome of these subjects the most protected secret? In the world of veteran agency researchers and Cold War historians, there is a persistent rumor regarding the Manchurian Candidate Protocol. People gossip that the redactions in the Terminal Condition 9 aren't hiding deaths, but the factual proof of successful personality splitting. The speculation is that the agency succeeded in creating assets with two distinct conscious minds, one that is alive and awake while the other sleeps, allowing for 24/7 surveillance by a single human being. Behind closed doors in the fringe science community, there is an intense speculation about the pineal gland extraction theory. Many believe the redacted files cover the extraction of DMT or other chemicals from subjects kept in these hyper-aware states. The rumor suggests the agency wasn't just observing consciousness, they were harvesting it, trying to create a physical awakening serum for high-level officials. In the dark web forums dedicated to Project MKUltra, a chilling theory persists about the digital upload. Some theorists believe the Terminal Condition 9 redactions hide experiments where subjects' conscious neural patterns were mapped during early analog to digital converters. They argue the agency attempted to keep the mind alive by transferring the hyperstimulated consciousness into a primitive computer matrix, making the awakening eternal and artificial. There is a widespread conspiracy theory that MKALIVE was the actual precursor to Project Stargate. Theorists argue that by keeping subjects in a state of chemical hyper-awareness, the agency opened the third eye. They speculate that the redacted disposal files actually detail how these subjects began to perceive events in distant locations, leading the CIA to move the project from chemical awareness to psychic intelligence. Was MKALIVE a success? Tactically, it was a chemical alertness victory. It proved that the biological limits of wakefulness could be pushed far beyond their natural boundaries. Strategically, it was a moral catastrophe. While the project provided the agency with a map of the human awareness threshold, it did so at the cost of the mental and physical health of dozens of subjects. The project was a success because it allowed the agency to develop counter-interrogation stamina. It successfully identified the specific neurotransmitters responsible for maintaining the vigilant state. The program successfully birthed the neurostimulant doctrine that has influenced decades of pharmacological research. It proved that the human mind can be held open by force even when the body is screaming for shutdown. This research established the continuous engagement model for deep cover operators who must remain alert in hostile territory for days on end. It was a success because it defined the metabolic ceiling of human focus. The project successfully created the blueprint for modern cognitive enhancement protocols. Ultimately, it was a success because it gave the agency the power to deny a human being the basic right to sleep, turning the biological necessity of rest into a tactical choice. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs go, the awakening led to quite a few, such as neurostimulant targeting. The research into high-potency stimulants led to the development of precision nootropics used by elite special forces to maintain focus for 72 hours without the crash associated with older amphetamines. Brainwave entrainment software, the use of sound and light to maintain consciousness, has evolved into cognitive recovery suites used to help patients emerging from long-term comas. Sleep suppression doctrine. The agency's infinite awareness studies provided the groundwork for circadian override therapy, allowing industrial workers in high-risk environments to work non-standard shifts with minimal cognitive decline, and biometric stress mapping. Data collected from the continuous monitoring of MKALIVE subjects led to the creation of wearable fatigue detectors, which analyze heart rate variability and skin response to alert commercial truckers and pilots seconds before a microsleep may occur. MKALIVE reminds us that the agency views the human mind as a frontier to be conquered. When we take a pill to stay awake or use an app to focus, we are standing on the shoulders of the awakened subjects of the 1950s. The agency understood that the ultimate weapon wasn't a bomb, but a man who can't close his eyes. The distorted beep of the heart monitor is the heartbeat of a world that has forgotten how to sleep. We are living in an age where presence is a commodity and alertness is a requirement. The walls are still moving and the eyes are still open. In the pursuit of total consciousness, the agency may have lost the very essence of what it means to be human. We have traded the peace of the dark for the clinical light of a permanent vigil. The legacy of MKALIVE is the realization that the mind is a machine with no off switch, provided you have the right chemicals. Our modern 24-hour society is merely the civilian application of a project designed to break the soul. We are all subjects now living in a world of induced light and chemical focus. Thanks for listening, and remember, the eyes are always open. Join us next time as we examine the rat hole. In the urban mazes of the Cold War, the agency didn't just need spies, they needed ghosts. We'll uncover the secrets of the rat hole, the designation for clandestine escape routes or safe houses used to move assets through hostile territory. This wasn't just a map, it was a policy of operational disappearance. Join us next time for The Hidden Shadows. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archive.